Welcome everyone for this first edition of our recap and review of True Detective Season 4. Just in case you're new here, we're going to be recapping every single episode. There's 6 episodes for this season, so we're going to be discussing each and every one right after the episode goes off. So the episodes air at about 9 p.m., so look for these recaps and reviews to be up around 10 p.m. Eastern Time. So let's get right into it. A lot to jump into with this episode. Uh, One thing that stood out to me initially is that we have two murder cases that we're trying to solve. Well, two incidents, let's put it that way. One is a murder, which is the outstanding murder of the Native American activist Annie Kay. What happened with her? What's going on? What are the ramifications in the city of Ennis behind that? And the more recent incident is the dead scientist discovered out in the ice from the uh, station where they were apparently doing investigations, Salal scientists. Why were they out there? Uh, how did they end up on the ice, and what precipitated them actually leaving the facility and going to certain death. We had the one incident where it says she's awake and then the lights go out and then we just don't know what happened. But before going into all that, I wanted to start with the opening of the episode. As you see at the title of this recap is called Is the Night Country Carcosa? And for veteran True Detective fans, they know what Carcosa means from season 1, what that could allude to. Why is that coming back up now? One of the things that stood out to me, the opening quote that we have for this episode, and I wanted to read that, it's attributed to Hildred Castaigne. And the actual quote is, "For we do not know what beast the night dreams when its hours grow too long for even God to be awake." Now, Hildred Castaigne is a fictional character and is from the story called The Repairer of Reputations. And that's a short story from Robert Chambers from a longer book entitled The King in Yellow. So without going too deep into that, essentially, Hildred Castaigne, he has mental illness, he goes insane and is committed to an asylum in the story because he believes that he's actually the inherent king of this land in America, and he's trying to wrest that control away from his cousin who believes is the rightful heir to that kingdom. So the story goes through all these people and the ills that befall them due to the Yellow King. And the Yellow King is a fictional character that eventually ended up in the Lovecraftian cosmic horror universe. So the reason why this quote stood out to me so much is because it's from this only short story character. So you would think if you read the short story, The Repairer of Reputations, that you would read the quote in that story, but the quote is nowhere in there. So this means that this is kind of a made up quote for lack of a better term, but it's not based in anything in our society, in our real world. So that tells me that everything is on the table this episode. That means, or this season. This means we're in a completely different universe where the rules that we're used to are completely upside down. We don't know if Hildred made this quote when he was in the asylum before he passed away, whether he's a real person in this universe. We do not know. But in our world, that quote is not attributed to him anywhere. So that's kind of exciting. But the reason why I think we're in Carcosa, and Carcosa is another fictional city, it's been used for over 100 years by dozens of different writers. And just to kind of give you a brief synopsis of it, it's a mythical, mysterious place. It's associated a lot with the occult. And in the Lovecraftian mythos, it's actually a place that's ruled by the Yellow King. So it's not somewhere you want to be. It's dark, mysterious. It says black stars in the sky. No one has completely described it. Even Game of Thrones, if you look at the map, they have a place called Carcosa, which is ruled by the Yellow Emperor. So very mysterious, but not some place you really want to be, for lack of a better term. So with this being called the Night Country, the reason why I think in this world, this might be the new Carcosa is that there's so many supernatural things that are going on that really can't be explained. And what's our opening scene? The opening scene is we have these elk as soon as the sun goes down. So that's number one. Apparently in this world, well, in Alaska, this is the last sunset of the year. And we're talking about 2 weeks before the year ends. There's going to be no more sunlight. As soon as that sun goes down, these elks, they scream and shriek and fright and commit a mass suicide by going over top of the cliff. And that's not normal behavior. You see the hunter that was stalking them, he's completely mortified. So number one, the animals are kind of stirred up by whatever's going on in this world. Number two, we have what happened to the scientists, them saying that she's awake, or the one scientist saying she's awake, the lights going out, and now we find them later at the end of the episode, they're all frozen dead with apparent terror on their faces at whatever they saw out on the ice, whatever made them run out in the ice in the first place, and they don't have any clothes on. So that's another dangerous thing that's happening in this world. Uh, the other thing I noticed is that everybody is very brooding. There's really no happiness that we saw in this entire episode. All the relationships are strained. There's no full households, a lot of broken homes that we're seeing. Liz, Jodie Foster's character, is at odds with her stepdaughter. We see Ange, excuse me, played by Kelly Reese. Her situation with her daughter, excuse me, her sister is not good. Her sister's kind of been committed because of mental illness. She has a strained relationship with an on again, off again boyfriend. Uh, and then also even the food that I noticed, no one had like a full meal, sit down meal this entire episode. Everybody was eating junk food, little small meals here and there, like food is scarce. So that's another thing that I noticed that stood out to me as far as kind of an ominous tone for this city that we're in. The other big thing that stood out is even going into the road into Ennis, Alaska, the trail or the street marker for the town says, "Welcome to the end of the world." Now, end of the world meaning the world as we know it, or are we entering just another kind of a cosmic horror, another time kind of universe? Or is it a little bit more practical and rational where this is a place where the rules of modern society don't apply? And that's why someone like Annie Kay, who's a Native American woman, was able to get killed like that with no justice because women in the society are not valued. Is it martial law in this city? Because if we're at the end of the world where we know it, where everything is isolated, people can get away with whatever they want to do out in these remote regions. So in a more practical sense, that could be the Carcosa that we're entering, because as we know in season one, Carcosa was a man-made place, and that was a place where the serial killer was sexually abusing those young girls. So is this another place where women are subjugated and taken advantage of and exploited? So a lot of this is going on. And then the title Night Country. So is Night Country just another play on the name Carcosa? So a lot of occult things going on. One thing that stood out to me is that the supernatural element to me is more overt. In the other seasons, you could kind of argue that, well, maybe this is in this character's mind, maybe it's symbolic, but we've had several instances where ghosts have appeared. In the Rose character, she has this ghost Travis appear to her and lead her to the dead scientist. That's pretty overt to me. We also had Liz, who seems to be a non-believer in any type of supernatural activity, but she's tapped on the shoulder by an apparent ghost saying that she's awake. That's another incident. So things like that are going on makes me think this might be the first season where we get some overt, very clear supernatural occurrences that can't be explained, not kind of riding the fence that we've seen in previous True Detective seasons. Now, whether that's a good thing or a bad thing, I think that's really going to depend on the viewer as well, because it can go either way. They can kind of go full on in the supernatural direction, or they can kind of keep it in the middle. I think probably in the middle is best, but I think they leaned into it a little bit more in the supernatural end, and that kind of heightened the suspense and the dread that we were feeling this entire episode, which I think is a good thing. I felt like a little bit of Twin Peaks in this episode. Even John Carpenter's The Thing, which is complete just straight horror, but just the way the bodies were frozen together at the end of the episode, it reminded me of that beast and that harsh classic. So a lot of that was going on here. Also, even in the scientists, once they were gone and Liz and everyone were investigating the compound, one of the scientists was apparently reading Blood Meridian, which is a classic novel by Cormac McCarthy. And that book focused a lot on just the evil nature of man, kind of the warlike nature of human beings in general. And so that makes me wonder, what was the mentality of the scientists that were there? Or were they there researching on how to improve the environment, or were they there trying to research on how they can exploit that area even more? So that leads into another mystery that we're going to get more into as the season goes on. But that's why I think we're kind of in our Carcosa. I think this whole region is just a dark and dangerous place. Unlike with Carcosa being just one particular area in season one, I think the whole place, the whole city, is actually under siege, and is, as of right now, is under the siege of evil. And I think what finally drove that home is that scene at the end of the episode where Liz has all the pictures lined up trying to make sense of everything that's going on. And what happened? The pictures are in the spiral. And we know the spiral is a very symbolic um, symbol in True Detective, as we saw in season one. It was on one of the bodies, and the whole motif about time is a flat circle. I think that's coming back, kind of a callback. So I don't know if we're going to get too much fan service like that, but it's definitely a direct callback to season one and this whole idea of Carcosa and being in the abode of evil and trying to fight out of it and find your way out of it. So now that we've covered that, let's go into our characters. We have our two main characters, Liz being Jodie Foster's character, and Evangeline Navarro being a former boxer, former world champion. So, I definitely had to cover her and shout this out, Kaylee Reese. So, between these two characters, you would just on the surface think that Liz is the more rational one, and uh, Ange is the more, as they call her in the show, some people, is the more spiritual in tuned person. But I don't know if it's that simple because as far as the only supernatural occurrence, you can argue it only happened with Liz whenever that ghost has tapped her on the shoulder saying she's awake. So maybe Liz has more of her spiritual base and what has been led on. And it seems like something may have happened that's caused her to lose her faith. So maybe this is her journey back to finding that. On the other end, while Ange seems open to it, she was asked point blank by Annie K's brother, do you believe in God? She says yes, she does. But when asked why, she really didn't give an answer. And we saw the flashback that she's a war veteran, and something was whispered in her ear from a dying soldier who was missing half his head. I couldn't really make it out. And it might have been, I don't think it was She's Awake, but it was something whispered that hopefully will get revealed later on in the season. But her faith isn't as strong either because, the brother said to her, it's great to feel like we're not alone. And she said that no, we are alone, and so is God. So that kind of goes back to that whole Carcosa thing about being at the end of the world, where even God can't intervene in this, you know, uh, abode that we're in now. Maybe this is the domain of the Yellow King, or the supernatural evil that just can't be contained in this particular area, and there's no escape for anyone. And that's why mergers like what happened to Andy K can happen, and whatever else is going to be revealed with this scientist thing as we move further in the season. But between the two characters, I think they play off well with each other. I like the banter back and forth. Obviously, they have a deeper history that we're going to get deeper into as the season goes on. Ange is very reserved. Um, Liz is more of an in your face, kind of tell you what she thinks about you, not really a people person. So I can see how they were at odds. And then culturally, the big difference where obviously Ange is very strong, a very strong proponent of standing up for women. We see how angry she was seeing that woman getting abused in the beginning of the season on that initial call that she went on. Also, she tried to make that right by sabotaging the abuser's truck later on, so he couldn't go and abuse her again as he planned on doing. And also that comment that she made to Liz about, if Annie K was a white woman, she would have been, her case would have been solved years ago. This wouldn't have went on as long as it went. And this whole idea of just letting her go, it's like, no, I can't let it go because justice was not served. So maybe Annie is the person that's screaming out for vengeance. This whole idea of she's awake. A tongue was cut out that was left at the scene with the scientist. Liz did identify that as a native woman's tongue based on some of the markings on the tongue. So, you know, is that Annie's tongue? Is Annie leaving a hint here? Or is it another woman? Were they doing experiments on Native women in this facility? And this is one of many that are coming back for vengeance. So much is on the table now that we just don't even know. Um, so I've covered a lot of the supernatural because that's always fun with, shows and things like that. But this is True Detective. And if we are looking at kind of what we've seen in previous seasons, there's normally a rational explanation for everything, even though there's a little bit of a hint of the supernatural, which can make you, kind of wonder if there's more at play here. So if we're looking at rational explanations, there's an incident that I looked up that is very famous. Let me make sure I get the name right. I think it's the Dyatlov Pass incident that happened in 1959, where the 9 Russian skiers were found frozen and half naked with trauma on their bodies out in the snow. They were all experienced, so there was no rationale about why they would be outside of their tents like that, why they had trauma on their face and everything. And there's been speculation for decades about what happened, anything from Bigfoot to Native people in the area being angry that they were there, aliens coming to attack them, all types of stuff. And when I was doing research, the recent theory that's came out is that it was likely an avalanche that caused that, and they didn't have time to really escape. And that's why they were frozen in that state and died of hypothermia. When you go through hypothermia, you start feeling hot. Because your body's going into shock and then you start pulling your clothes off and everything. So that seems like a rational explanation about what happened to the scientists once they got out on the ice, and then might have started hallucinating and seeing things, and that's why they look so terrified when they died out there. But still, what caused them to go out into the snow and the ice like that? That's the big question. So that might tie into what they were doing there. If they were abusing women or doing tests on women, there's history of, governments, abusing minorities. The most famous one is the Tuskegee experiment, where they were deliberately injecting Black men with syphilis in the early 1900s. So was there something similar like that going on with Native women where they were doing experiments on them? And then maybe the community found out, or maybe one of the women came back for vengeance and, came back with a weapon and forced all them out of there, and that was her revenge. No, that's a possibility. That still doesn't explain, the tongue just being out there, but that's just one rational explanation I could kind of think of what may have happened. So those may be cases, and if that's going on, if they're doing scientific experiments on women, that's a grand conspiracy that probably involves um, the higher ups there in Ennis as far as on the political front. So that's a way to tie everything all together. As far as any suspects, because you're looking at who's evil, who's kind of shady, I don't think we've met the killer yet, but I am focused on Hank. Hank is very shaky, and that's the older deputy that was there with Liz, also there with his son. But Hank, number one, the fact that he had Annie K's file just sitting at home, that seemed kind of suspect. I mean, even though he has other files, he did not seem too enthused about pulling that file and bringing it back to the office. He even claimed that he really didn't have it. So that's a problem. So to me, I think he's covering for somebody. He's a little too small and a little too frail looking to me to be the actual killer, but can't put anything past anyone. But I definitely think he's involved at some point. His son Pete seems like a good guy. I don't have any bad vibes about him. Um, he's married to a Native woman too, so I think he has incentive to do right by the community and also having a mixed son. Um, no one else really rubbed me the wrong way. Kavik, who's Angie's on again, off again boyfriend. Kind of feel bad for him. She put it on him and then left and then took his toothbrush at that. But he seems like a nice guy. I don't have any bad vibes about him. Um, Maybe even the hunter. I thought about that earlier just now. The hunter that saw the elks all die. Maybe he ran into the science lab and was angry, saying you're destroying our native balance with the animals. Whatever experiments you're doing here is disrupting the order of things. Maybe he was the one that, you know, ran them off out of the facility. So that's the only other people I can think of. But my gut tells me we haven't met, who's behind everything yet. This was kind of just a good introduction to the main characters. So I'm very intrigued. We have some nice little callbacks to season one. But I do think things are distinct enough especially having two women as the lead detectives, one being a minority and one coming from it's kind of, a white background and not really seeming to have much, I won't say antagonism to the Native American community, but doesn't seem too enthused about it either. Just kind of like keep that over there, especially all that spiritual talk. I think that's a good dynamic for them to kind of bounce off of each other. So a very good groundwork episode, very strong atmosphere, very brooding, very tense. The polar bear thing with the one eye, I'm not sure what's going on with that. If that's a spirit animal, I would think it would be with that type of appearance. Didn't seem particularly aggressive. So, I know, polar bears are the most aggressive bears. So it's hard for me to see the polar bear being a force of good, but we shall see. Didn't attack anyone. So let me know what you guys think. This is episode one. I think we've covered everything. I'm still really stuck on that opening quote from the Hildred Castaigne fictional character. That's really a made up quote. That really kind of excites me, make me think that everything is on the table for this season. But let me know what you think about True Detective episode one. Do you think we're on a good track so far, or is it a little bit too uneven? And let me know what your theories are. Do you think I'm way off base with this night country being a version of Carcosa, or do you think they're just pulling too heavy on the supernatural too early, or do you like that balance of having a little bit more of that early on in the season? So I'll be back to cover episode two, and that will be next week, right after the episode airs at 10 p.m. So make sure to like and subscribe and turn on your notifications to get all of these reviews. And I look forward to your feedback, and we'll see you all next week. Enjoy the holiday weekend.